from participating in discussions or voting on matters related to their own applications, according to the local government association. Impact on decisions. If a councillor who voted for the application participates in the decision-making process and votes on the application, there is a risk that the decision could be challenged and potentially overturned in a judicial review. So in my view, therefore, the councillor should declare their interest and not participate in the discussion or vote on the application at the planning committee.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy, and that deserves a proper legal response. After, in the light of what has been expressed, is Councillor Murphy right, or?
Yes, happy to support through you, Chair, and addressing the points that Councillor Murphy has made. I think just before I respond, there are various statements that have been made in respect of what you've just outlined, and from a broad perspective, what you've said is that councillors have expressed support for an application that's before members tonight. Is that in respect of the previous meeting that happened at full council? Is that what you're alluding to? Yeah. Yes. Okay. So just to address that particular point, yes, a meeting did take place on the 9th of December 2024 in terms of an extraordinary meeting. That particular meeting, a decision was made that this site formed part of a number of potential sites to be progressed as temporary sites for the use of travellers. So in respect of that particular decision, the council as a corporate body was very much acting in its housing capacity, and this site, a decision was made to progress in terms of potential temporary sites for travellers. That progression has taken place in terms of the council being an applicant before members tonight. It is for members that are sitting on this particular planning committee. You are acting in your capacity as planning committee members. You are required to determine the application in terms of its merits and material planning considerations as detailed within the report, and you are there within an open mind. So if members are predetermined beyond outside of that particular meeting, then that needs to be deemed in respect of the merits upon individual cases. But in terms of that particular meeting alone, that does not stop any member sitting on this planning committee. You are here as members of this planning committee in terms of the council exercising its functions as a local planning authority.
Councillor Murphy, do you want to respond? I mean, all I can say as chair is if you yourself feel there is a conflict of interest, then by all means, vacate the room and...
Thanks for that, Chair. But I wasn't at the meeting in
Right.
December.
Fair enough.
And obviously there was some members who voted for and against, and there was obviously some who abstained. So I find it difficult to understand. Maybe it's my small brain, but we've had colleagues leave this room, and I think for a lot less, because they feel they have a conflict of interest. But if you're telling me that we won't be challenged and can't be challenged in the court and be reviewed, I'll take your professional word for that.
Just through you, Chair, again. Yeah. As I said, just in simple terms, the council is exercising its functions today as a local planning authority. The applicant is the council, and that progression as being the applicant directly arose through that full council decision. If I read the recommendation, that in terms of the particular meeting, it says the recommendations that the council notes the responses received to the public consultation exercise, has due regard to the responses and consider which, if any, of the 6 potential sites previously identified are to be progressed as temporary sites for use by the travellers. So therefore, the council as a body made a decision to progress this particular site, and that is the reason why the council has come forward as an applicant, and therefore separately, the council is now discharging its functions as a local planning authority, and in respect of discharging those functions, the members of this planning committee are discharging those functions.
Thank you. Councillor G, and remember we're talking about interests and...
Yeah. I think I agree with Aftab on this, because you can't. I mean, we all took place in the meeting on the 19th of December, whether we voted for or against. But you can't take that into a planning board meeting, because you've got to respect the situation of a planning board meeting. Because you wouldn't be able to have a meeting tonight otherwise, because we'd all have to go out of the room. So quite honestly, I think Aftab's totally right with that. You've got to respect us to be able to listen to the details tonight and make the decision when we come to the voting, and listen to all the, representations. So.
Thank you, Councillor G. I think on the light of the information and response to Councillor Murphy, I think we need to proceed. We go then to public participation.
Yeah. Can I make a point of order, please?
Yeah, go on.
It's come to my attention that a county council officer is going to speak tonight, and I understand that he has been directed by a single county councillor to come to this meeting and to speak, and therefore he is not speaking on behalf of the county council. It appears that he is speaking on behalf of a single councillor who has directed him to come. So I'd be grateful if, when members who are intending to speak tonight say who they represent and who particularly they represent, and whether they have been directed by anybody else to attend this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. So do you wish to respond? Okay, yeah.
Just a point, related to the speaking section within this planning committee meeting. Just for the benefit of primarily for the members of this committee, it is important that members draw upon the planning training that they have, the material planning considerations in respect of the determination of this planning application. Certainly what we don't want to do is to disrupt public speakers when they are speaking in terms of non-material planning considerations. We want to be respectful, as the chair has outlined, in terms of having a fluid meeting and allow those to speak. But at the same time, members need to be aware of those material planning considerations. Matters such as antisocial behaviour, as members will be aware, are not material planning considerations. So, and as officers, we are here to support members in respect of those material planning considerations. And if there is any degree of clarification that's required, then certainly we can address that during the course of the meeting.
Yeah, can I come back on that? Can I just say that intent in speaking is important as what is actually said, and the intent with which any statement is made is important. And if somebody has been directed, that says something about the intent by which they speak. And the officer concerned is down as speaking for the county council, whereas in fact there has been, as I understand it, there's been no motion in the county council for him to speak tonight, and therefore he is not speaking for the county council. He's speaking for the person who directed him to speak tonight.
Thank you, David. Go on.
Just through you, Chair, just to ensure that Councillor Hughes's point is addressed, then yes, prior to that, the allocated representative from the county council, if he could just address that point, then certainly that would be helpful.
Thank you, David. So as I earlier intimated, we've 18 speakers, and the first speaker is the district council ward member and also county councillor, which is Susan Hobson. So Susan, you've got 5 minutes and we will listen with care.
Good evening, Chair, staff and members of the Planning Committee. I'm before you this evening as the local councillor to strongly object to the proposed use of Old Station Close, Rowsley, as a site for travellers and to denounce the deeply flawed process behind it. The significant number of objections from residents, Rowsley Parish Council, Derbyshire County Council, local businesses, visitors, Rowsley Primary School and the Level Centre reflect widespread concerns. Has the Planning Committee seen all these objections? These concerns are heightened by a grossly inadequate consultation process, flawed decision-making and the complete disregard for material planning considerations and the Derbyshire Dales local plan. I have already made formal complaints to Derbyshire Dales District Council. You will have seen the report from P&DH which clearly challenges this planning application. There will be legal challenges should this site be approved. The Equality Impact Consultation and report has been criticised for being utterly deficient and failing to properly evaluate impacts on protected groups or engage meaningfully with the community. Critically, a Derbyshire Dales District Council report commissioned by the current administration explicitly dismissed Old Station Close, Rowsley, as a permanent site due to its unsuitability. So what justifies its inclusion as a temporary site now? Has the Planning Committee seen this report? With nearly 400,000, that's 400,000 users of the White Peak Loop in 2024-2025, the proposed site's proximity to this heavily used trail raises significant safety and access issues for all. Moreover, the needs of the vulnerable staff and users of the award-winning Level Centre, a vital hub for people with disabilities who need this car park, have been completely disregarded. Have Planning Committee members visited the Level and the businesses? You will hear again tonight of another site, the Woodyard at Holmesford, which has unanimous Derbyshire Dales District Council Planning Committee approval. This site was, however, rejected by Derbyshire Dales District Council without all the relevant information being given to councillors. The Old Station Close car park proposal, yes, it's a heavily used car park, is a travesty of planning and a betrayal of the people of Rowsley, those running their small businesses on the adjacent estate and nearby are the lifeblood of the community. This inadequate planning application dismisses critical risks, ignores vulnerable people's needs and erodes democratic accountability. I urge you to reject this ill-conceived plan outright and commit to a process that respects our residents, protects our vulnerable, and restores faith in fair decision-making. Look at all the evidence, You're the elected councillors here tonight to represent the Derbyshire Dales. I implore you all to listen carefully to everything that's said tonight and reject this ill-conceived plan outright. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hobson, and thank you for speaking within time. We then have our second speaker, Tim Simcox, Director of Local Business. And Tim, you're going to speak against the application.
Hello, members of the committee.
Can you switch your, yeah, and it'll indicate you've got 3
Not
minutes.
used to this.
No.
Hello, members of the committee. My name's Tim Simcox, and I'm a director of TC Harrison Group, who operate a business close to the proposed site, and we're also a landlord of a nearby property. And we're objecting strongly to the application as it will impinge and impact our business. We trust that the members tonight will have an open mind to the application and trust that they will carry out their responsibilities with respect to the validity and accuracy of the planning application process and the application itself, which contains fundamental inaccuracies. We hope that the fact that the application is from the council does not mean that the application is treated with any less scrutiny and held to the same account as a private application. The public representation from P&DG and the legal letter, which we believe has not been acknowledged, this has been passed to the committee, submitted to members prior to the meeting, provides in-depth detail of the fundamental inaccuracies. In addition to the number of parking spaces being inaccurately recorded, we do not feel that adequate consideration has been given to this displacement of parking onto Chatsworth Road, a main through route to Chatsworth House and onward to Sheffield. This through route is already problematic and will be exacerbated by displacement, causing disruption and dangers to residents. We also hope that the members have due consideration of the views of local residents and businesses and the safeguarding of the traveller family themselves, the level centre and schools. I would also like to reiterate the lack of engagement or even acknowledgement of the concerns of local residents and businesses, and hope that the members of the committee have taken time to consider these. In particular, the 300 signature petition in summer 2024. And I'd also like to raise that the Derbyshire Dales District Council meeting of the 9th of December, the strong feeling that was expressed there during the public participation stage, which was rendered invalid by a last-minute motion that was put to the council, of which the public participators had no knowledge, and their speeches were not framed to take into account that motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. The third speaker is Kerry Andrews from the Level Centre Director to speak against the application. And when you're ready, Kerry, just switch the button and...
Is that it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fine.
The public sector equality duty is a legal obligation for public authorities in the UK to consider how their policies and actions affect people with protected characteristics. This includes disabled people whom Level supports as a charity, as well as the families you are looking to house at Old Station Close. There is no acknowledgement to disabled people who have a protected characteristic alongside the travellers in point 7.11, or the lack of understanding of the detrimental impact this will have on our charity in point 7.3. Level's community is reliant on public car parking facilities. We have just 2 disabled bays and 1 other. We have 6 members of staff and a pool of freelancers. We have visitors, tourists and participants attending. When Level was built, the Highways Department stated that Old Station Close would need to be used as an overflow car park. A reduction in parking will fundamentally change our charity. Our charity contributes to the economy, provides employment and supports the well-being of Derbyshire residents. Travelling by public transport is not an option for many disabled people. If parking is reduced and it becomes difficult for staff, visitors and tourists to attend, we could lose our funding and could result in closure. Section 149 is part of the Equality Act 2010, which refers to the public sector equality duty that places a legal obligation on local councils to consider equality issues when making decisions. The internal council equality impact assessment did not consider our users and proximity and use of the site. Public consultation had no specific equality impact questions. The systemic ableism and discrimination in this planning application reports pack does not have to be intentional to be unlawful. In 2016 in Birkenhead, the High Court overturned permission for a wind farm in a car park that was regularly used and valued by disabled individuals, stating it would create access difficulty for those with impaired mobility, and that the inspector had overlooked 149 of the Act in reaching his decision and thus made an error of law. The Equality Act asks you to give specific, careful consideration as to the potential implications of any project for those with protected characteristics and implications which may not be immediately obvious. Such consideration should be expressly taken into account in decision-making if overlooked. Section 149 of the Act in reaching a decision could deem an error of law. If you have any doubt about the impact on reducing car parking facilities at Old Station Close will have on Level and for us as a community working with vulnerable people, then you should be voting against this this planning recommendation. There will be significant detrimental impact on level. We won't have enough parking, people will stop attending, our engagements number reduce, we cannot fulfil our funding requirements. A reduction in parking facilities means there is simply not enough space for all employers of Old Station Close, visitors, tourists and level participants. We are a much busier organisation compared to 2013 when the site was last occupied. 24% of the UK population identifies as disabled. Consider what someone you know or have met who may have a learning, physical or hidden disability, mental health or chronic illness. At any point, any one of us could become part of that 24%. Level is a charity supporting the 24%, parents, carers and the wider community. There is ingrained ableism in this process and a lack of awareness of the needs and access to provision and services of Level Centre. And I'd like to know why the legal letter sent yesterday has not been acknowledged. Why is this? Thank you.
Thank you. Can that be responded to now regarding a legal letter?
Yes, just through you, Chair, in terms of the legal letter, if we want to term it in that frame, yes, we have received a letter. I would also say that, I would also say that the actual letter itself is very clear that it does specifically say that it is not a pre-action protocol letter. Yes, it sets out the intention that a judicial review may come. We have assessed it in terms of our responsibilities, in terms of protecting the council, myself as the monitoring officer and my deputy monitoring officer, and in terms of our legal judgment, we feel that the council can proceed in terms of the determination of the planning application tonight. I don't want to go into further detail in respect of that, but as I said, in terms of yes, we can acknowledge we have received a letter.
Thank you. Our next speaker is David Gibbs, local resident. And David, you're going to speak against the application.
Chair, councillors, thank you. I'm here tonight to vehemently oppose the approval of this planning application. I'm a resident of Chatsworth Road in Rowsley, but more pertinent to this meeting, we opened a new business, Caldwell Flower, on the corner of the A6 and Chatsworth Road at the end of October. The proposed site is our nearest car park, and I will demonstrate the massive impact that the loss of this car park would have on our new business. My biggest concern, however, is that the report you have been presented with on which to make your very important decision is riddled with errors and factually incorrect statements. For example, in para 713, the Gypsy Liaison Officer reports that an incumbent family wishes to stay. There is no incumbent family, so that is false. I also had a conversation recently with Constable Jakins from the Neighbourhood Police Force, the police team, and he indicated that contrary to this report, the family do not wish to return to the site at Rowsley. We all know that they moved on from this site previously because it was unsuitable for them, and this was reinforced by this very council that said the car park at Rowsley is not a suitable place to house travellers. This brings me on to the biggest factual inaccuracy in the report. I quote from para 722, the site has little impact on nearby retail, railway bus and car parking uses and their customer patrons. This is manifestly untrue, as human faeces dumped portaloos in the environmentally sensitive River Derwent and the huge impact on trade to local businesses and visitor numbers to those with protected characteristics to the Level Centre demonstrated the last time this site was occupied by travellers. To dismiss this as little impact is at best misleading and at worst simply untrue. More recently, for a period of approximately 6 weeks, commencing 13th of January 2025, Severn Trent Water were granted exclusive use of the part of the car park as a compound. I have analysed turnover in our shop for this period, and take-ins when the car park was restricted were 26% down compared to the preceding 6 weeks, and 57% lower than the following 6 weeks after the car park was fully reopened. Those reductions in turnover for 8 months of the year would make my business unviable. That is not a little impact, yet there is no mention of this in the report, despite me writing to the council with those figures. So in very simple terms, I place it on record that if you approve this application and the previous reductions in takings in my business are repeated, my business will fail. And I will insist that each and every one of you comes to the meeting that I would be forced to have with my 2 members of staff, both of whom are Dales residents, to explain to them why I am having to make them redundant. I'm afraid to say you've been badly informed in this report, and I urge you to do the right thing for everyone, including the traveller family themselves, and throw out this ill-advised, poorly prepared and factually inaccurate application. Thank you. That's called timing.
Thank you, David. Yeah, you're all doing well, actually. Councillor Froggatt. Helen, are you a parish councillor? You're not?
I'm not here as a councillor or a resident of Rowsley.
I need to say no more. You just get on.
Thank you. Right. Thank you, Chair and members, for allowing me to speak. I'm not here as a district councillor or a resident of Rowsley, but as a concerned resident of Derbyshire Dales. And tonight I'm speaking from the heart. And I'm speaking against officer recommendation on this planning application. This site has many small businesses who are, I'm sure, struggling in the present financial climate and will no doubt have a drop in their customer base if this application is passed. Also, I have great concerns about the Level Centre. This is, and this is in their words, it's a charity with a mission to celebrate the art that difference makes. This centre supports disabled artists and provides a platform for sharing their work, whether it be visual, digital or performing arts. We have to protect this vital community asset, and I would urge anyone on this council to go and have a look. It's a wonderful place. Finally, I come to the other businesses in the locality, naming just a few: the Peacock, the Grouse and Claret and Peak Village. But mainly Rowsley Post Office and Village Shop, which I believe is under threat of closure. Our aim should be to protect these businesses, not to put them at further risk. I therefore urge you to reject this application. And that's even quicker.
Thank you very much, Helen. So we move on to Helen Talentire, a user of Level Centre. And you're going to speak against the application.
Hi, thank you and good evening, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak. I am Dr. Helen Talentire. I'm also a local GP, so I'm not just a parent of children who attend the Level Centre, I'm also a local doctor. We have perhaps a unique perspective on that car park because we can't just leave our children and at the Level Centre when they go to attend their groups. We have to stay close. So we have sat in that car park sometimes up to 14 hours a week. So we've seen how busy it is. It's full, it's used, it's a hub. People come to walk their dogs, they come to ride their bikes, they come to meet as groups and go for a walk. It's very busy. Sorry, I will return to my notes. I would like to stress that I absolutely support the goal of providing safe housing for those in need. However, I've got serious concerns about this proposal. Using the car park as regularly as we do, we see how busy it is. We see the pollution that potentially a family would be exposed to. It's incredibly dusty. We can't sit there with our windows down. The dust coats the cars. After only an hour or two, the cars are coated. When we drive off, we have to use the windscreen wipers. To actually live in an environment that dusty is going to be detrimental to health. Has that actually been considered? Have people looked at that potential impact? We can see firsthand in health how poor living conditions can affect both the physical and mental health of people. Housing needs to be more than just shelter. It needs to be safe, clean, conducive to rest and recovery. This car park, as it currently functions, does not meet those standards. Just urge the decision makers to reconsider this location. It's vital to provide housing that's suitable. At the end of a busy, dusty car park is neither suitable or safe. Please can we work together to find a more appropriate solution, one that protects both the dignity of those who need housing and also protects the need of our community. On a personal level, the benefit to my family and those of the other people that I see using it has been immense. It's a vital resource. It's something that I direct people to in the course of my job. If you haven't actually been and seen what they do, I urge you to. It's more than just an art centre. It is a way that people reconnect and supports mental health. It's more than a gallery. I can't express it in words. I'm not good with words like this. But if you haven't actually been, please do go. And that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
No, thank you for sharing those comments. Can I just ask, is it possible for us to have these doors open here, just to let a bit more air in it? Oh, sorry. Right, that's the reason, is it? Yeah. So, better not. So I'll invite Councillor Cathy Potter, please. Rowsley Parish Council, local resident. And you've got 3 minutes, Kath.
Thank you. I have been a parish council member on the Peak District National Park for almost 30 years and served on many committees, but usually on planning, so I do understand the process. I am of the opinion that the District Council has produced a shoddy, if not negligent, application document by ignoring the views of local businesses and residents and the travellers themselves. I've spoken on several occasions at Derbyshire Dales meetings, and to this one alluding to unacceptable behaviour when a male caravan driver defecated in a Rowsley car park. I actually witnessed what happened. I ensured that the offending excrement was disposed of by using the implements I brought to make sure the wreck was suitable the following day for usage. The council offered no help. When I tried asking for help, I felt I was ignored. This is unacceptable. Maybe we should be fighting for a rates reduction. Sadly, my observations of attending council meetings leave me resolute that the council is determined to have its own way and not a way that best serves the community, that of Rowsley and surrounding area. I stand to be corrected. Please listen and take on board residents' comments. This site is a car park, a busy one, that it is in a village on the edge of an outstanding natural beauty, the first national park. I do not appreciate comments from some people that it is being undermined, but to vote yes to this proposal would be a retrograde step. Flooding brings problems to Rowsley and Darley-Dale. Sadly, in 2019, only yards from this site, the High Sheriff of Derbyshire lost her life in the floods. Floods impact badly on Rowsley and therefore are likely to affect parking at this site. It is irresponsible and downright dangerous to propose siting travellers' families on a steep-sided car park in close proximity to the river known for flooding and accompanying issues. It is downright dangerous and truly irresponsible in my view. Thank you for listening and ask yourself, would you honestly encourage anyone to settle on a floodplain? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. We invite now John Ewart, please. And you're down, John, as Community and Renewables Planner, and you're going to comment on the application, please.
Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I trust that councillors have read my recent 4-minute email. I don't need to read it out. I abhor discrimination. I'm angry that travellers in the Dales have been discriminated against for at least 15 years. And if permanent provision is not made soon, it will continue for the remaining 2 years of this council. I'm grateful to the officers who proposed the Hasker farm site because they agreed that the national value of a planning permission for undeveloped undeveloped pitches is £40,000 per pitch. This valuation enables me to ask the council to buy the woodyard and either to offer it to tenants at a higher density and a lower rental, or to offer it to fewer tenants at a lower density and a greater cost to the council, to the taxpayer, sorry. I gather that there is a dispute over servicing costs between the officers and the owners. The owners know best. A way forward is an open discussion between the officers and the owners to open the woodyard as soon as possible. I hope the councillor will propose the higher density solution in due course. I have a lot of experience, 50 years experience of planning. I've scanned the various objections to this proposal, and I believe they're overwhelming. So I'm sat here today offering a solution to the problem, and that is to get on with the woodyard as approved, indeed, Chairman, by your good self at that meeting. And that way we provide a solution for anything up to 8 traveller families. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for those comments. Call upon Councillor Joe Wildgoose from Rowsley Parish Council, please. And you're going to comment upon the application, please.
Rowsley Parish Council strongly objects to this planning application and it should not be recommended for approval. The National Planning Policy Framework requires that all planning applications must be determined in accordance with the local development plan. This application goes against not one but at least 5 of the Council's own plan policies. First, the businesses on Old Station Close employ in excess of 35 local people, depend on the car park, which is extremely busy during standard working hours. A loss of parking for these businesses goes against the District Council's own local plan policy S9, which states it will support the retention of existing employment within existing communities. Second, the lack of parking will force people out onto local roads. You will know Chatsworth Road is already gridlocked on a regular basis due to parking and traffic spills out onto the A6. This is against local plan policy S9, which protects existing infrastructure and connectivity within rural communities. Also policy HC6, which states that a gypsy and traveller side should not result in a level of traffic generation which is inappropriate for roads in the area. 3, the application goes against the district's local plan policy S7 and EC11, which is to support the development of the White Peak Loop, which already has planning permission to go through the car park to keep cyclists safe and off the road. The County Council has sent in serious objections to this application on the same grounds. 4, the application goes against local plan EC8, which promotes sustainable tourism. Rowsley is the main gateway to the national park, and its only car park is used heavily by tourists walking to Chatsworth House, Haddon Hall, Bakewell, as well as walking the Derwent Valley Heritage Way and accessing the White Peak Loop, especially now because of the recently created cycle path at the top of Church Lane in Rowsley, which now links Rowsley directly to the Monsell Trail. 5, the site is against the local plan policy HC6, which states that the council will safeguard land at Watery Lane, Ashbourne for the travellers, which they have not done. Not only does this application go against the local plan, but it also goes against the council's public sector equality duty, which is a legal obligation. The loss of the car park will disproportionately affect the users of the Level Centre, a one-of-a-kind arts centre for the disabled and neurodivergent, who have to park at Old Station Close because they are disabled. The actual state of this planning application is also appalling. It's full of misleading and inaccurate statements, including that the travellers are already on site, which is a lie, and that the application is retrospective for this reason is also a lie. The application also lacks essential detail regarding the design of the site, and it neglects to state the site will only be used from March to November as voted for at the 9th of December full council meeting. This application is also against the travellers' own wishes and requirements. Dr Siobhan Spencer has said time and time again, including at the public meeting held in Rowsley at September last year, they need to be in Ashbourne, close to the family, the children's schools and their support services. The site is completely unsuitable. It's small, dark, damp and will be fenced off separate to the community, which is against even the government guidelines for a traveller's site. They've left twice before in the past of their own free will and hate this site so much. This application should not be approved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Robert, it's now your turn. We first met yesterday at the site visit, didn't we? And you're not speaking as a parish council, but as a local resident. Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Robert Hockley. I'm a resident of Rowsley for more than 40 years, and I'm objecting to this application on the following grounds. My first main concern is the appalling state of this planning application. It's full of inaccurate statements, including that the travellers are already on site and elsewhere, which means that it's a retrospective application. Both these statements are false and misleading. The travellers have not been on the site for some years. Excuse me. No regard has been given to the impact on the village in the report. The previous consultation information, including a 300 signature petition, seems to have been hidden. The application also lacks essential details regarding the design of the site, contamination report and the landscape report. I'm a retired construction lecturer, but you don't need a degree to see that there are no gullies on site, so how can surface water be disposed of via the main sewer? It appears to me that the application was written by someone who thinks approval is a foregone conclusion. Everything about it is wrong. There are 125 public representations against this application through the planning portal, not all from residents, but from sensible, like-minded people who use the car park from all over the country, county and area, such as cyclists, hikers, campers and dog walkers, who use the car park as a base. Rowsley is central to many of the tourist attractions in the area, but there are no other car parks within Rowsley that could offer such a base. When the family were in Rowsley before, as people came to park, they were intimidated to the point that they were unlikely to leave their vehicles, rendering the car park useless. This will obviously affect local businesses who will, as before, inevitably suffer losses through these actions. 35 people are employed in these businesses and their jobs will be put at risk. The Level Centre for the Disabled is a nationally renowned arts charity and relies on its users and visitors. The last thing it needs is for the car park to become unusable. At full council meeting on the 9th of December, the council voted to approve 3 sites for this family, Rowsley, Matlock Bath and Middleton by Wirksworth, in a last-minute block vote. Yet only this application has been submitted to the committee, and it's taken 7 months. Why? How then can this family move back to the Matlock Bath in November without such planning permission in place? Might I add that the reason that there are so many objections to this application is that the family in question have been here twice before. We've experienced their occupation and the fallout. We don't want the disruption in the village that they cause or the disgusting mess that was left behind. I don't believe that a single family in the village would disagree with any of my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, well in time. Yeah. Oh dear, 46 years ago, David, you were my boss, and here I am with the hammer in front of you. So, Town Councillor Wheeler, you're representing obviously Darley-Dale Town Council, and David, you're going to speak against the application.
I am, but I am also a trustee of the Whitworth Centre, but I'm actually going to speak as a previous trustee of the Level Centre for 9 years, and my final role in there was acting chair. We were controlling a building worth in excess of £2 million. I suspect the value is more like 3 now, and a 6-figure income funded from public money. The future funding of Level is now subject to constant re-evaluation, but building audience participation is fundamental to the success of this organisation. The loss of capacity in the car park will have a massive impact to the growing success of the centre and jeopardise its future funding provision. A recent event at the Level resulted in 170 people attending in one day, plus the 6 staff. That just about fills the car park without the needs of all the other businesses and social entities in Rowsley. A needs assessment of the parking requirements for the centre and the businesses on the estate clearly shows that the indicated parking capacity is totally insufficient and will impact on congestion in the lane as opposed to the comments made by County Council. No risk assessment appears to be being carried out for the segregation of pedestrians and cyclists using the trail. Restricting the capacity of the car park will inevitably impact on the access to and from the trail, with cars blocking the route. If you look at the location plan on the front of the screen, the White Peak Loop ends pretty well where the density of parking will be greatest given the proposal goes ahead. Considering the millions of pounds of public money that has been spent on developing the White Peak Loop, and that the trail from Rowsley to Bakewell is about to be finalised, it is more than disappointing that the consideration to users of the trail appears to have been totally overlooked. The improvements to the White Peak Loop to Bakewell will have significant impact on its use in a similar manner to that of the Monsell Trail when that was fully completed, requiring exponentially more additional space in order to make full use of this major investment. This proposed development will impact on the local businesses, but more importantly will have a severe and detrimental impact on delivering what has been promised from two projects through the use of substantial amounts of public funds. And I believe the proposal should be reconsidered. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. And now it's the turn of Richard Bean, please, local resident.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me the opportunity to speak. I live on Old Station Close and have a business on Old Station Close. And like David Burton, I've serious concerns about the effect it's going to have on not just residents, but the businesses essentially. We need to remember that we've had two previous occupancies on this site. And I have little doubt that we're going to end up getting an approval tonight and supposedly subject to conditions. But these conditions don't mean anything. We've had them before, conditions applied in both instances, and there's been no attempt whatsoever made by the council to enforce these conditions. They're just farcical, really. No attempt at all. Numerous complaints were made from residents, business owners, cycle path users, hikers, visitors generally, and the council didn't have the courtesy to acknowledge any complaints whatsoever, let alone deal with any, which is shocking, really. No consideration has been given to users of the car park in any way, shape or form on the previous two occasions. It's very clear that this family don't want to be there. You're offering them a prime piece of real estate in the Derbyshire Dales, beautiful riverside location. What could be better? We'd all love something like that given to us free of charge. Well, these people don't even want it. Everything that they're given, they abuse, they tear it up with both hands, throw it in your face, and then defecate on it. So, thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Verity Foster, please, a user of the Level Centre.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I'm speaking as a parent. My daughter attends the Level Centre every week, and I strongly oppose the planning application. Firstly, the car park is vital to the safe and accessible operation of the Level Centre. As we've heard, it provides creative opportunities for individuals with learning disabilities and neurodivergence. Not only that, it's growing and there are more and more visitors coming to the prolific arts exhibitions and workshops. So there are only 3 parking bays directly at the centre, 2 of which are designated disabled spaces. This car park is not a luxury, it is essential. Secondly, I oppose the proposal to site a traveller camp next to the Level Centre. This is not a judgment of any one individual, but a serious concern about compatibility of land use and safety. The proposed location is simply not suitable. In my professional capacity working within the NHS, I am a community occupational therapist, and I've had experience of working with a patient on a traveller site at Matlock, Bath. I feel that placing such a site next to an arts centre that caters specifically to individuals with physical disabilities and neurodivergent needs, it is not just incongruent, it's irresponsible. The sensory sensitivities and anxieties many participants face make even routine activities a challenge. The unpredictable and potential chaotic nature of a neighbouring temporary site poses a serious risk to the well-being and inclusion. This is about appropriate planning and safeguarding. The car park and its surroundings support one of our most inclusive community spaces. The Level Centre is a cultural asset, and the council has a duty to protect it. It's not a compromise its function. You're going to compromise its function by limiting access to it. You're actually putting visitors off from coming if they can't park their car. There is no on-road parking. So this is why I oppose it, because it is an unsuitable development. Thank you.
So it's now the turn of James Button, please, local resident, who's going to speak against the application. Mr. Button.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here to speak against the application. My name is James Button. It is quite clear that there's a great deal of local opposition. Unfortunately, the report does not explain the detail or the nature of those objections, which were made abundantly clear at the public meeting, at which only one of your committee was present. Although the report tries to address the concerns, the report highlights the concerns that the report highlights. Many of these seem to be oversimplified. Overall, it is quite clear that this application has not been properly thought through, is being forced through for the political expediency of the council, who are desperate to find any site for travellers, having failed to do so for the last 40 years. All of this to the detriment of Rowsley. What steps will be taken to enforce the planning conditions that you recommend? What happens if the travellers refuse to leave after 24 months? How will you ensure the site will only be used between the 1st of March and the 31st of October? What happens if they arrive early or leave late? How will the council restrict occupation to the named travellers? How will the number of caravans be limited to 4? How will commercial activities taking place on the land be prohibited? Although toilets are to be provided, what compulsion will there be for the travellers to use them? Last time there was human filth spread all around the site. What consequences will there be if the site is left in the state that it was last time, when it took your officers and contractors at least 3 days to clear it? How effective will the management plan be? Again, what enforcement and sanctions will there be? Some of the concerns are as follows. You've heard about the loss of car parking space with the attendant impact on the local businesses and the village as a whole, where car parking is at a premium. School Lane, Church Lane and Chatsworth Road are all congested for parking a great deal of the time. This space is vital for safe drop-off and pick-up of school children, especially as the parking at Caldwell's Mill has been lost. The impact on the school seems to have been completely disregarded. At the public meeting last year, it was made clear that the behaviour of the travellers at their last visit in terms of shouting, in particular obscene and foul language, was such that at times the children could not be allowed to use the outside play area. Is it really likely that here-ass fencing with acoustic panels attached will prevent such complete disamenity? The site is an important car park for the trail and a point where many people join or leave the trail, and again the impact will be significant. Although it may be the view of your various experts that these impacts will be minimal, unfortunately only time will tell. The experience when the site was used for this purpose before was wholly negative. The area engendered an unpleasant and aggressive atmosphere which discouraged many people from using the trail, walking past the site or parking near to the site. The perception and fear of aggressive and unpleasant behaviour will be sufficient to deter people from the vicinity. Such fears, whether justified or not, will lead to a devastating impact on the businesses in Old Station Close, the businesses around the rest of the village, and will impact on tourists visiting and using Rowsley, which is, after all, one of the principal gateways to the national park. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we're getting towards the end now, so it's Philip Nightingale to comment on the application, please. And Philip, you've got 3 minutes.
Okay. Oh, is this on? Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to have a word tonight. I'm here to add some comments, really reiterate some of the things that have already been said, particularly as a dad and a customer of some of the businesses in the industrial area, and as a former caravan occupant, which is probably fairly unique. So I spend, probably 15 or 20 hours a week currently sitting in the car park waiting for my kids at the level centre. The level centre is absolutely a brilliant resource for them. They come on so much because of it, and I see the work that the level centre do for them and their friends and other people. The car park is vital for them. Why anyone would jeopardise that, I do not understand. I watch the amount of traffic come in and out for the businesses that are local. They all rely on that car park, either for staff parking or for customer parking or for vehicles that are being looked at for the tyres businesses and the garages. They will all suffer, and I sat in the car park over the winter when Severn Trent were using that compound, and all the parking being squeezed up to that end was quite horrendous, really. So all those businesses, and it's been said many times, rely on that car park, and that's without any traffic being pushed out onto the main road or up Chatsworth Road or any of the places. All those businesses rely on the car park. They all suffer if the car parking is squeezed. In the course of the last 12 months, we've had wet weather and we've had dry weather. In the wet weather, the surface of the car park is basically a slurry. Your vehicle is filthy by the time you've gone out. You've not really got much choice about it. In the dry weather, particularly recently, swirls of dust and it goes everywhere, right? Now, many years ago in a former occupation, I spent a summer and a winter living in a small caravan in a farmyard, which wasn't nearly as busy as that car park, but was quite dusty. At the end of 12 months, the dust and the mud, because you trample it in, was everywhere. Now, when you live in a small caravan, you use the outside of it as much as the inside. Even the boxes that were sealed, as far as I was concerned, just had thick dust in them after 12 months. Now, that was a dusty area, but it wasn't nearly as churned up as this particular car park. So my 11-year-old daughter said, they want to put caravans on it. That was her reaction to it. That certainly is my reaction to it. I would oppose it, find a better place. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Philip. You've just exceeded your time, but that's okay. Yeah. Dale Radford, Senior Planner, P&DG, representing Rowsley Local Community and Business Group. You've got 3 minutes, Dale.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members, and thank you for the opportunity to address you all this evening. It is alarming to understand that it appears the committee are oblivious to the submitted legal representations made to the District Council yesterday. I would strongly suggest that following the public speeches, members that have not witnessed the contents of this adjourn the meeting to review this legal representation and its contents ahead of debating the proposal. You will have heard tonight the personal experiences of those directly impacted by the actions of the Council. Collectively, there is a strong consensus that the District Council have shown a clear disregard for the community of Rowsley and have pursued a flawed agenda. We note on several occasions that the council have been informed that this site is unsuitable for residential occupation. Our formal representation has been endorsed legally, and therefore we respectfully ask that if any members of tonight's committee have not reviewed our formal representation, they abstain from voting. In addition, should any members have been unable to visit the site and experience the surroundings and the level centre, we respectfully ask that they abstain from voting. Now, you may feel that these are strong statements. However, as this legal representation sets out, the officer's report to committee contains material errors of facts, misinterpretations of policy, and has failed to engage with the principal controversial issues to the extent that it is inaccurate and misleading. It is our view, endorsed legally, that the necessary evidence to determine this application is professionally authored in our formal representation. It is unbiased and highlights to you, as the decision makers for this application, that you cannot undertake a full and balanced assessment of the application. Critical information demonstrates inaccuracies, and important information does not form part of the application. Of greater significance is that the application demonstrates clear conflict with both the development plan and national planning policy, including policy specific to the intended occupants. For any decision to be made tonight, it must be made on the basis of being informed by accurate and reliable evidence. Legal representation once more concludes that a grant of planning permission tonight will be susceptible to proceedings for judicial review. This statement is not without meaning either. Legal representatives are instructed by the Rowsley Residents and Business Community Group, and I quote, to consider proceedings for judicial review and based on the current officer report, in the event that planning permission is granted tonight, will be at liberty to launch a legal challenge forthwith. As elected members, you have been elected to not only represent your constituents, but also the local communities, businesses, tourism attractions and economy of the entire district. Therefore, tonight, we strongly but respectfully ask that you step up and represent the community of Rowsley by challenging the District Council's undertakings to date and the flawed planning application to which you are to determine. We, as planning professionals, endorsed by legal representation, conclude no grounds to approve this planning application.
Dale, your time is over, please.
And therefore, respectfully ask for you to vote this plan, use this planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you. Perhaps ask later our officer to respond, please, to some of those allegations that have been made. I mean, I'm not as clever as you, Dale. I'm just a well-meaning member of this local authority that's been elected to serve Darley-Dale. But I am concerned about some of the things that you've raised.
Before Aftab does respond, I think it would be advantageous for the committee to see the legal representation that the council has received, so that we can read that before Aftab makes his comments.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What I would propose is when we get to the end of this section, we have an adjournment to just do that, David. Or other people can take a comfort break, perhaps. But I think that's good advice, David. Yeah. So we turn now to Paul Cottam, Rowsley resident, to speak against the application. And then we've just got one more after you, Paul. That's it then.
Okay. As a Rowsley resident, I feel that our views so far during this process seem to have been completely ignored. This village has just over 220 houses and a small business park. In the council's own survey of the residents, 255 return surveys objected to the proposal. In the parish council's survey, 305 of the Rowsley residents and business owners signed a petition objecting to the proposal. These figures represent a 100% objection rate for the village. During this process, the Gypsy and Traveller Working Group haven't displayed any regard whatsoever for the views of the villagers, and neither has the planning officer in his report to this committee. In his 18 pages, there is just one small paragraph about the villagers' objections. He states that he received 92 written objections and a further 31, which he classes as for consideration. I've actually took the time to read the 31 for consideration, and all of them in their context are against the application. They say the site isn't suitable. They all have concerns about the lack of parking it will cause. All that's missing is the word objection. I urge you to read those other 31, which is for some reason excluded, and make your own mind up as to whether they're objections or not. The reason why it's took 20 years to find a permanent site is because nobody wants the travellers on their doorstep, as they cause all manner of problems. That's the elephant in the room, which hasn't been properly addressed during this process at any point, and which everybody tiptoes around for the fear of being politically incorrect. Trying to placate the residents with this proposed code of conduct for the travellers is an actual insult to their intelligence. The code is a complete toothless tiger which borders on the derisory. The Gypsy and Traveller Working Group have had tunnel vision about the Rowsley car park from day one. For them, it's an easy fix. Shove the travellers into a small, out-of-the-way council car park in a tiny village which has little or no voice. For them, it's mission accomplished, job done. No regard given whatsoever for the residents who are left to live with the aftermath of it. I urge this committee to give the views of the residents of the village proper consideration and not ignore them, as seems to have happened so far in this process. I'd also like to mention that I actually cycled there this evening using the Rowsley to Matlock cycle trail, which, if this planning and application is granted, that will be trashed. If it's granted, I won't be using that cycle trail again, because when they were previously there a few years ago, I tried to go through the car park on my bicycle, through the travellers sat outside the caravans, which there were 9 caravans in here at that point, and I was verbally abused and threatened. And I've mentioned this previously in two previous representations to this committee.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, you were just over time, but finally, Stephen, can I ask you to come forward, please, and address the committee? Can you say, please, just simply in what capacity you're here tonight? Yeah, and thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm Steve Buffrey. I'm the Strategic Planning Manager at Derbyshire County Council. Just if I could address the issue that was raised by Council earlier on about whether I was instructed to come tonight, I can categorically say that wasn't the case. A request was made to the County Council, really, is anyone going to be attending from the County Council to put the County Council's case? So it wasn't an instruction at all. It was a question whether someone was going to be here to speak tonight. So that was deliberated at some length at County Council on Friday between senior officers, and it was deemed appropriate that I should attend. So, but we weren't instructed to.
Well, thank you for your presence.
Okay, thank you. Yes, well, thank you, Chair. I'm here to speak on behalf of Derbyshire County Council tonight to set out the County Council's strong planning policy objections to the planning application, which it submitted to the District Council on the 17th of April. Essentially, the County Council considers that in planning and land use terms, the application site is not suitable for a proposed traveller site and is contrary to the location requirements for traveller sites set out in national policy, which is the National Planning Policy Framework, local planning policy in the Derbyshire Dales local plan, and the recommendations of the Derby and Derbyshire Gypsy and Traveller Accommodation Assessment. So in that context, the County Council is particularly concerned that the site is located adjacent to the White Peak Loop, which is a significant tourist facility in the area. And the White Peak Loop and its development is a top priority for Derbyshire County Council in delivering the wider key cycle network, which will have great benefits to the local area and wider area in terms of boosting local tourism, the economy, promoting greener travel and enhancing the health and well-being of local residents. And as you'll be aware, the off-road section of the loop between Matlock and Rowsley was completed in 2018 and currently terminates just short of the car park, the subject of the planning application. So the County Council is concerned that the use of the car park could impact on the delivery of the next phase of the project, which would see the loop extending through the car park and beyond. So the County Council really wants to ensure that access is available to the site for purposes of undertaking surveys and ground investigations to facilitate the extension, and that when complete there's a physical segregation of the route from the car park in terms of a 5 metre wide sort of strip. So that's one of the main objections. The other is in terms of visual impacts. As you'll be aware, that the sites are very open when it's visible from Old Station Close, particularly from the east. And we see from the planning application that's proposed to be sort of fenced off by a higher style fence 1.8 metres high, which I think in its own terms is a sort of a very stark feature in the landscape. So we do feel as though, you know, that sort of feature isn't appropriate, and much softer landscaping measures like planting, screening will be much more appropriate. Then in terms of the health and well-being of the traveller families, the Gypsy and Traveller Accommodation Assessment recommends that traveller sites should promote healthy lifestyles for traveller families, such as ensuring adequate landscaping and play areas for children. However, we've looked at the planning application again, and there's no soft play areas, there's soft landscaping, it's all in the side layout. So concerns about the well-being of children of the families residing on the site. And then finally, again, the 1 metre high Harris fence style fencing, it does give the impression that the site's somehow being segregated and isolated from the rest of the community. And again, national policy and the national planning for traveller sites does really recommend against trying to create this this sense of segregation and isolation of travellers from the rest of the community. So that's my end of my piece, sir.
As I say, thank you for your presence and your contribution, Stephen. Will someone move that we have an adjournment, perhaps for 10 minutes, please? Is that seconded? And perhaps during that time, if we can find the appropriate legal letter, it can go onto members' laptops, perhaps, to look at. So if members of the public wish to go and have a drink or a bit of fresh air outside. You're not Or David, could you just see if Councillor Burfoot's outside, if she'll come back into the chamber, please? The legal letter that came only yesterday has been circulated to members, and I'll ask after perhaps you can elaborate on that.
Yes, just through you, Chair, just to assist members as per the request of the Chair and members of the committee. The legal correspondence, if we want to term it that way, has been circulated to all members of the committee. It is based upon a threat, if we want to deem it that way, in terms of if planning permission is approved tonight, that there will subsequently be a judicial review challenge. Just in basic terms, in terms of the judicial review and the legal framework, it is based upon Wensbury unreasonableness principle in terms of illegality, rationality, and procedural impropriety. I certainly do not want to go through a legal lecture with all members of the committee in terms of the detailed basis of any legal ground, and also going through in detail the contents of the correspondence. Members tonight are here to determine the planning application. You are not here to determine the merits of a legal challenge. I appreciate that there may be a perception that the two are intertwined, but what I will say is that as the council's monitoring officer and the council and my colleague and deputy monitoring officer have, in accordance with our responsibilities, assessed the possible legal challenge, and members can continue with the determination of the planning application tonight. There are a couple of matters that need to be addressed. They will be addressed by my colleague Mark, and that's all I have to say really. Happy to pick up any questions, but as I said, we are here to determine a planning application. Well, members are here to determine a planning application. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like us then, members, to proceed now with the determination of the application. This is found on pages 9 to 28 of the agenda. And after much patience, I will invite the case officer, Mark Simmons, to outline. Sorry. Yes, yeah. I was asked to point out the late representations. Now, I know most members, I hope every member did on arrival look at the information that was provided regarding the late representations. I would say all these representations were actually expressed by the 18 people that have addressed the committee tonight. So again, I do thank all those 18 people for, in their own way, expressing their areas of concern. But as I went through the sheet at about 5 o'clock, there's nothing here that I don't think was covered by you, the speakers, tonight. So.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to all the speakers tonight. So I will start with the late representations, which Chair has just referred to. The late representation sheet covers all representations submitted since the Planning Committee report was written and summarises as clearly as possible points raised. There was one representation that came in too late to then be put on that sheet, which was from Natural Stone Sales Limited. It arrived too late today to be included on the sheet. The owner or the representative of that business has spoken to committee tonight, so there's no prejudice to that person. Their representation just came in too late to be included, but they have spoken tonight, so they have had the chance to verbally put their points across, and I believe they also objected in writing to the application. So a couple of clarifications from the representations made tonight. Not many. A broad point, which is that a general thrust of the representations made tonight, allegations of antisocial behaviour, which, whether true or not, are not material considerations, and my legal colleagues will confirm that they shouldn't form part of the determination of the application. A couple of really key points. One is that our legal team confirmed that the committee report gives due regard to people who are protected under the Equalities Act, which predominantly in this application is the travellers themselves. They have protected characteristics as an ethnic group and way of life that is protected by law. And people with disabilities have protected characteristics, and they are referred to in the report, and due regard has been given to that element. I would just briefly refute the claim that the council is in any way acted in a way that is ableist. I don't believe that's true. So the probably next main point that's been raised in objections and in verbal representations tonight is regarding the number of car parking spaces. I've been to the site 3 times now and had a really good look around the site. The parking spaces aren't marked out, they're not white lined, there's no bays, so it's a judgment. The council, Derbyshire District Council, Derbyshire Dales District Council, who manage and own the car park, believe there's 29 spaces. That's on the official website. I've checked with colleagues who have involvement with the management of car parks, and they confirm that the site is considered to have 29 spaces. However, and this is a point in the legal challenge letter, my colleagues just reminded me, so it is a really critical point. The Highways Authority of Derbyshire County Council have assessed the application. They have visited the site and assessed the site, including on weekends, and they consider that there is no loss of parking or highway safety issue that occurs from this that would justify a refusal. I've been to the site 3 times. I've called by twice on afternoons and found that the application site has been almost devoid of any vehicles, and if the vehicles that are in the front part of the car park were more neatly parked, they all would have fitted in quite happily. But with the Highways Authority raising no objection, their officers having visited the site, myself as the case officer having visited the site on 3 occasions, and on none of those 3 occasions was the car park full or overflowing. On 2 of the occasions, all the cars in the car park would have happily fitted in the area outside the application site. We do not consider that there is a material reason for refusal on parking or highway risks of any kind, and a judgment about the number of spaces in the car park is open to interpretation and judgment, and the council's position is 29 spaces with 9 lost. I've seen reference to the county council's application where they show marked out bays and they believe they can create 53 spaces across the site. You know, that is an application with an approved plan. That's not the reality on site at the moment. There's no bays, and just for absolute clarity, we do not feel there's a material reason to refuse the application on parking. A couple of other key points. There was a speaker talked about the need to determine applications in line with the local plan. Really key point on that. What the legislation and guidance actually says is that applications should be determined in line with the local plan unless material considerations strongly indicate otherwise. It is open to the planning committee to consider that material considerations outweigh harms identified and conflicts with the local plan. There is an error in the report, which we acknowledge, that it's not a retrospective application and the travellers are not on site currently. I am happy to say that's an error, so we acknowledge that, and members should be aware of that on the planning committee. Just bear with me, I'm just trying to make sure I cover everything. their speaker said that the site had been dismissed as a permanent site. That is correct. That's not a formal planning determination. That's a judgment by the council as a body, and that doesn't mean it's not suitable as a temporary site to meet a need. The GTAA, the Gypsy Traveller Accommodation Assessment, identifies a shortfall across Derbyshire, including Derbyshire Dales, which the County Council and their representation concur there's a shortfall. So there's a need to provide gypsy traveller sites, and this site has come forward following a process of identifying sites, and it's before you today for determination. I would just like to respond to 1 point. 1 point made in the verbal representation tonight by Stephen Buffery from Derbyshire County Council. In my professional opinion, the site is heavily screened, and the only public views, if you want to put it that way, would be really once you're inside the car park, really. From Old Station Close, you could see the physical characteristics. You'd see caravans, you'd see the fencing, but there'd be passing views. Once you're into the car park, you would see the site and the physical development clearly. Outside of that very limited view from the east and inside the car park, the site is very heavily treed on the perimeters, and the visual impacts, the landscape impacts, would be absolute minimal. I'd also like to clarify that the County Council, in their objection, state that the site is in a flood zone, and I understand that the previous case officer drew to their attention that it's not, and they have not acknowledged that. The Environment Agency themselves, in their letter of representation, state the site to be in flood zone 1. And just to be absolutely certain, I checked the Environment Agency's website this morning and put the address in and checked very carefully, and it is definitely not in a flood zone. The flood zone runs quite close to the site, but because of the topography and the height of the site, it is absolutely, definitely not in a flood zone, and that's a really important point. I think that I've covered the points that came out in the public verbal representations tonight. So this application is for a temporary permission for a change of use of land to a traveller site for a temporary period of 2 years, which would be limited by condition to the 1st of March to the 31st of October in each of those 2 years. So that's absolute limits, and a temporary permission is all that's been applied for, and if the application was approved tonight, then the permission would be time limited, and time limited to certain months of the year. The plan in front of you on the screen shows the site and its surroundings. It shows the level centre, which is shown as art centre and various businesses. It shows the Old Station Close, the access in, which is red edged to 6 metres wide, and it shows Dale Road North, and to the south shows where you'd start to meet larger groupings of residential properties. So in terms of plans, there isn't a vast amount more to add. There's some details on the site layout plan, which shows the water supply, fencing, etc. The conditions include that the details on that plan, particularly the water, etc., would need to be accessible before the site comes into use. And there's a condition requiring a management plan, which would be submitted to the local planning authority to consider, and if it was found appropriate, to be approved, and then that would be an enforceable management plan. So that is the general details of the application. A few points I'd like to run through. I already covered it, but the application relates to gypsy travellers who are of a protected characteristic. The council has a duty to recognise and facilitate their way of life. At this moment in time, there's a shortfall in gypsy traveller pitches, and these applications are coming forward as a proactive effort by the council as a body to find temporary solutions to housing gypsy travellers, while the local plan as a process brings forward and delivers permanent gypsy traveller sites. This, we will acknowledge that a car park is not necessarily perfect or ideal, but is it suitable and acceptable for a temporary period to give travellers a safe location to be off the road and on a managed site for a temporary period while the local plan team, their job is to bring forward permanent sites. The planning officers consider it is acceptable, it is suitable, it is safe, and whilst there are impacts, every development has impacts, and what the planning committee need to consider is the planning balance, and in the planning balance does the benefit of providing accommodation for part of our community who have protected characteristics, who live in Derbyshire and live in Derbyshire Dales and are part of our community and our heritage, and we have a duty to facilitate their heritage and their way of life. A planning balance is to be made. There is an impact, there will be a loss of some parking spaces, and the loss of parking spaces, which will have some impact across the wider area, needs to be balanced with that. I would strongly go back to the point that the County Council as Highways Authority, having visited the site, personally visited the site on weekdays and weekends, find no reason to justify refusal on any highways grounds, not parking, not road safety. And as the professional experts in the field, we are strongly guided by the County Council as Highways Authority. We don't feel that there is an impact on local tourism that would warrant refusal of the application, and we don't feel that there would be an impact upon employment, employers, businesses or employees of businesses that would warrant refusal of the application. All these things need to be taken into account. There may be some minor conflict with certain policies. The application site may not be absolutely perfect, but does it provide an acceptable and suitable temporary accommodation for gypsy travellers? As officers, we have concluded that on balance, yes, our recommendation is for approval and the application is put forward on that basis. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Now, can I just remind members that in order that the meeting is properly conducted, please bear in mind that at this point it is questions, not statements. We can all express later when we have a motion, perhaps a lot more within that part of the meeting. So, Peter, Councillor Slack, you were the first to indicate you wanted to ask a question.
Thank you, Mark, for that. Can you hear me? Yeah. I'm not used to these. Thank you, Mark, for that report. I've got three questions, really. The first one is, in the report, some residents have spoke about contamination of the soil. Has any survey been done, and has it results of that survey? That's one of my questions. First question. The other one is design of the site. The site, these enormous site, really, to me, it's very, very large. Who's designed it, by the way? Who's surveyors and designed it? Because is it in keeping with what they have to have for 4 caravans?
I'm happy to answer all three questions once
One
you've
more question is the gate to the palisade fencing. What sort of gate will it be? Will it be a Irish fencing, or will it be a swing gate? Or that's me 3 questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So I'll answer the questions. So question 1, contamination. There is not a contamination report as part of the application. The works are minimal in terms of ground intrusion and works that could lead to a safety issue from contamination. Members, if they were minded to approve the application and considered that was a risk, would be completely entitled to impose the full suite of contamination conditions, which would then require them to submit a contamination report, which would investigate the site and propose any necessary mitigation. We'd be quite happy to impose such a condition if members felt that was important.
so up to date, there's not been a survey?
I've not seen a
Contamination.
contamination survey on the file or for the application.
Yeah, that's the question, yeah.
So the second question was design and size of the site, and it's a really good question, councillor. When we attended the committee site visit, it was a point of discussion. We didn't discuss the merits of the case for obvious reasons, but the spatial quantum and size and scale of the site was discussed. I've taken the opportunity to discuss that with the housing officers, and my understanding is that whilst it looks like a large site for 4 caravans and for a family to spend several months over the summer on there, that has been designed in line with guidance, and the architect who worked on it has advised the housing team that actually that's the bare minimum that would be acceptable for a family to occupy, and that it's within a metre or two the same size as the Matlock car park scheme that was approved previously. In terms of the gates, I haven't got exact details on that, and that could be dealt with by condition. That, you know, final details of the gates and fencing could be conditioned quite happily, and that's not a problem at all.
Right, thank you, Mark.
Thank you. It's Councillor Stuart Lees, then it's Councillor Hughes and Councillor Dobbs. Stuart.
Thank you, Chair. Some of my questions have already been answered, or two, well, one of them has, sorry. The report referred to these coping stones that we looked at yesterday. We brought it up briefly. Is that irrelevant now, or are they still on site somewhere?
Unless they're locked in those containers, then I couldn't see them on site, so they're probably not massively relevant, but the condition's there, so if they are locked in those containers, then we'll require details of where they're going to be further securely stored.
Does refer to it on the Conservation Officer's report bit. The other thing is the old station close? Is that an adopted highway, or is that Derbyshire Dales?
You've got a representative of the County Council who might be able to just confirm, is that an adopted road? Thank you, it's an adopted road.
Adopted, right. And I think that's it for my questions. Thank you.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two completely different questions, so perhaps I could take them one by one. The first one is about the equalities issues, and I was taken by, I think, it was Verity Foster's comments about neurodivergency in these, and the issues associated with chaos and disruption that cause real problems for neurodivergent, can cause real problems for neurodivergent people. And in getting to the level centre, they will have a journey which may or may not be stressful for neurodivergent people, and then they have to come to the level centre, and either they park in their parents, or they park in a car park and walk down to the level centre, or they get driven directly to the level centre and then the car is parked somewhere else. And so there's a whole process associated with arriving at the level centre. And my question is, did the Equalities Impact Assessment consider that process for neurodivergent people, and was it done by somebody who is qualified to undertake such a review for neurodivergent people?
I will be completely frank, Councillor, I can't answer that question. I don't have that information in front of me, so it would depend on how key that information is and the weight that you would give to the possible impact.
Thank you. My feeling is that it is pertinent. The second question is about car parking numbers and the layout of the car park outside the proposed travellers area. In Matlock, the travellers area, we ended up by creating a separate entry for travellers and for the car park, because our experience was that some additional travellers parked their caravans in the car park, and rather than in the travellers area, because that was already full with the families who lived there. And the consequence was that the council had to construct a separate entrance, which seems to be working very well. and indeed we gave planning permission for that for the travellers area in Matlock Council, in Matlock Town Councils, in Matlock car park just recently. Can I ask how we're going to safeguard the car parking area from use by travellers for additional caravans? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think that the application site, if there was a temporary need, authorised or not, for additional caravans, there's space within there. If caravans were left in the car park for a prolonged period, then the local planning authorities have to take a view on whether that was something that was a breach of planning control, and then whether they could take action. But I think that would be more in the nature of sort of behaviour and social and antisocial behaviour that's less controllable. And the Highways Authority raised no objection and don't see any risk in that event. The permission's purely for 4 caravans within the application site. So I'm not aware there would immediately be a need or a reason why there'd be additional caravans in the car park area.
Chair, I feel that there is a risk associated with that. And could you comment on that risk? And could you also comment on the impact that would have in terms of chaos and disruption that may cause problems for neurodivergent people whose parents may use that part of the car park to park?
Okay. Yeah, I'll answer very quickly just to say that all I can say is that we're assessing the plans in front of us. We're not aware that there would be any additional caravans or overspill, and the Highways Authority raised no objection. We're kind of trying to predict something that isn't proposed, isn't put forward in front of us, and as professional planning officers, we can only advise on the application that's in front of us and the plans that are set out in front of us. I'm not aware of any particular risk or that anyone has given any advance notice that there'd be additional caravans brought to the site.
Yeah, just through you, Chair, just to support the planning officer in terms of that particular point, in terms of the risk of additional caravans going on site, that in effect is, I would deem a hypothetical circumstance. Appreciate that it may arise, but in any event, it's as the planning officer has outlined, it is for members to determine the planning application before them, not to be concerned in respect of hypothetical circumstances, and if they do arise, then that's where the council's planning enforcement powers do come into force as the local planning authority.
Councillor Peter Dobbs, and then it's Councillor Luty, Peacock and Councillor Buttle. Peter.
Thank you, Chair. My first question, I'm now going to have 3, because just pick up on a point that Councillor Hughes made in terms of your understanding of the travel plan granted in 2006 when the Level Centre was opened. My understanding of that is that people who attended the Level Centre would be dropped off, and at no point in time would there be more than 4 vehicles on the Level Centre site. And we have extensively discussed the idea that we're using this car park was conceived of as a drop-off point. And I don't think that would have been very good planning, because although the road is adopted for part of it, it becomes a shared space as it turns left into the Level Centre, and there is no pavement. So hopefully we wouldn't have approved it at that point in time if that was the case. Could you confirm, Mark?
Thank you, Councillor. So I have seen a copy of the travel plan from 2006, I believe, which is obviously some considerable time ago, and circumstances change. The travel plan that I saw refers to a maximum of 4 vehicles a day attending the Level Centre and the use of a minibus. That's an old document, and the weight to be given to that, I would say, would be very, very minimal. As a guide on something we're dealing with today in front of us, but that is correct. That was a document that was in front of the council at that time.
Okay, thank you. My second 2 questions. Of the 120 odd representations, then approximately 2/3, about 80, are non-attributable. My understanding that means they didn't give an address. What weight should we give to attributed
comments as opposed to non-attributed comments? Is there a difference?
So I'll answer that briefly, and then my legal colleagues might want to add. But all representations are material and are taken into account. We're legally required to give notice to any representation received, and then our job is to decide, do they raise sound planning issues and the weight to be attributed. I think it is a fair process of attributing weight to representations that if the address of the person isn't known, it reduces the weight you would give to that representation, because they may not live in a proximity that is affected to a great degree. They may be, they may not, we don't know that. So it would have a limiting effect on the weight you'd give to those representations, and that would be something for the planning committee as determining body to be mindful of. I think that we've been very fair as planning officers, and we've looked at every single representation, we've accounted for them all, and we haven't said ignore any representations. We've noted the ones that are unattributable, and I think it would be fair to say that the weight to be given to those would be lessened to a degree, because it's not possible to tell how close they are, how directly they actually are affected by the proposed development.
As we continue with questions, Neil, I do apologise, it wasn't you, it was John. So it's now Lucy Peacock, then Councillor Boynton, and then Sue Burford.
Mike, following what Councillor Hughes was saying, I was wondering, would it be possible to condition a height barrier on the main car park entrance?
The entrance is within the blue edged area indicating the applicant's ownership, so therefore it would be legally possible to impose a Grampian style condition that required works to take place at that access if the planning committee were minded to approve, and if they wanted to add a condition in that regard, that would be acceptable.
Yes, thank you. We've got responsibility towards the travellers' way of life. Have the travellers been visited recently to ascertain if it fits with their needs, or have we just assumed that the Rowsley site meets this?
That is probably separate to determining the application. The applicant is seeking permission for a temporary traveller site to try and meet its obligations as a housing authority. The discussions that have been held between the housing authority and the travellers, I'm not party to, and I have not, as case officer, had discussions with the travellers, if to be completely frank. Whether it's acceptable in land use terms, impacts, policy, etc., is all accounted for in the report. This is an attempt by the district council as housing authority to bring forward sites to meet a need, and in terms of housing that is provided across all sectors, whether it's social housing, for protected people, or for emergency accommodation, etc., etc., it may not always be possible to find the perfect and ideal location those people would want, but the council as a housing authority is attempting to find sites that can meet a need, and for a temporary period. So I'd suggest that to meet a need, you don't always necessarily have the perfect solution. And as far as the planning considerations go, I think it's very minimal in terms of the recommendation officers have made or the decision the planning committee would come to. I don't think that would be a material consideration, and I've not been part of the discussions. Thank you.
Councillor
Chair, can I come back on that one?
Yes.
If this site is given temporary status, does that meet the council's need from a housing point of view in its duration?
I would say not. I've read as much as I can of the GTAA for Derbyshire. It's a big document. It identifies a shortfall pretty much across all of Derbyshire that's covered by it. There's a shortfall in Derbyshire Dales. This site on its own wouldn't meet, it wouldn't address or overcome that need. It would provide temporary relief for a small portion of the traveller community, but it would provide some need, it would provide some accommodation, and so in the planning balance that is definitely a positive, and that is a material consideration of some weight, I would say. Thank you.
Are you okay, John? Yeah. Burfoot, please. Does anyone else wish to ask any questions after Sue? Okay, Sue.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question referring to the representation from Derbyshire County Council. They've pointed out that the adverse impact on the delivery of the White Peak Loop. I'm just wondering how much weight we should give to that, and to also to their view that the site is unsuitable based on national planning policy for travellers. So kind of two questions in one there, please.
Thank you, Councillor. So I'll come to the second point first. My understanding is that the County Council has objected to all the sites that the District Council have put forward as temporary sites. They are not supporting us as a council, be very clear, as a council, not in your determination of this application tonight, but they haven't supported the District Council in any of the sites they've put forward, and at this moment in time Derbyshire Dales is failing to provide traveller sites. That's a policy failure. So I would add a limitation to the weight to be given, because they're not supporting or bringing forward other sites, and there is a need. And this site isn't being put forward as a permanent traveller site. It's for 2 years, and it's for March to October over the summer season for 2 years. So it's a temporary permission that's being sought, and we've acknowledged that it's maybe not the perfect or ideal location, and it probably wouldn't get permission as a permanent site. It's a temporary solution to a housing need that's been put forward by the Housing Authority. So I would just frame it in terms of that, in terms of the County Council objection. In terms of the impact on tourism, there is an impact. I'm not aware of the exact timelines and dates for this section of the White Peak Trail to be delivered. The County Council speaker referred to possible need to get on site to do works, investigations, etc., which would suggest they're not imminently about to deliver the scheme, and that's not in my knowledge, so I'm surmising that, so please don't take that as something to rely on when you determine the application. This may delay those works, those investigations, and it may delay the delivery of that section of the White Peak Trail, which is an impact, and we acknowledge that, and that would certainly be something for a committee to be mindful of when making a decision. The District Council as applicant, an owner of the land, has clearly expressed their view that providing this temporary accommodation takes precedence over the White Peak Trail on that section, and hence they've put the application forward, and as planning officers we don't disagree with that, and we feel the planning balance weighs in favour of the proposals, but it's certainly something that should be in your minds when you determine the application. Thank you, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you. So second question of 3, if that's okay. Oh, sorry, after.
Apologies, just through you, Chair, and just to just support in terms of the point around the county council representation. Within the county council representation, there was a reference, as you've alluded to, Councillor, in terms of the application not conforming with national planning policy. Within the representation, I don't recall any form of detail behind that blanket statement. What members have before them is a report from the officer setting out how this particular application does conform with national and local planning policy. So just a support in terms of that particular query around the county council's representation.
So
Second question is just following on from my previous one about, just to say, does this application comply with our own local planning policies?
That's a very good question, councillor. I think the report sets out that there are some conflicts and minor conflicts. That's all set out in the report. There are some impacts, but the planning balance and the officer consideration is that the benefits of providing the accommodation would outweigh any minor conflicts, and hence it's recommended for approval. Thank you, councillor.
Final question, Chair, if I may, just following on from Councillor Hughes' question about measures to try and prevent additional caravans from entering the site. How much weight do we have to give to the fact that really to prevent additional caravans from coming onto this site, and indeed maybe, hopefully not, blocking the site? How much weight do we give to that when we're considering this application?
Thank you,
That
councillor.
is a possibility.
Thank you, councillor. And I think that goes back to AFTAB's advice. So it's more a legal point, and we've got to determine the application in front of us, and it's a hypothetical possibility that additional caravans could turn up on site, which then would be an issue that we'd have to deal with. But we don't know that. We don't have any evidence of that, and that's a hypothetical point. So I would say we would give very limited to zero weight to that particular point. Thank you, councillor.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. One final question. It's about the revised local plan that the council is currently pursuing, which requires a traveller's site or travellers' sites for it to be viewed as successful by the planning inspectorate. Would this site or any of the other temporary tolerated traveller sites be considered a traveller site in respect of the revised local plan and therefore meet the requirement for such?
That's a very good question, councillor. And unfortunately, I don't have anyone from the policy team here. I would say that a temporary permission in a site that's acknowledged as being suitable for a temporary use but not being put forward at this time for permanent use, and we would acknowledge wouldn't be likely to come forward for permanent use, would have very little bearing on the local plan process. Thank you.
Councillor Murphy and then Councillor Lees.
Thanks, Chair. We touched on it a little bit less yesterday. It wasn't the right time to do it, but what would be very useful is to know what the management plan will be for the site, because our experience of these temporary sites is that there are abuses, extra vehicles turning up, materials dumped on site and whatever. And of course, some of the speakers tonight have mentioned that they've lost faith in us as a council reacting to issues on site. So if we could have an update as to what we plan to do to sort of reassure the residents. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. So I would say exactly the same as the Matlock application in May. I think officers would be happy to agree that the management plan and the condition that's put forward for this one has been checked against what members felt was appropriate for Matlock. Would require a management plan to be submitted for scrutiny, and we would certainly be happy to have input from the chair and vice chairs of the planning committee as to the details submitted before officers signed off on that management plan, so there'd be member involvement and scrutiny. Officers would have to come to a professional technical resolution on the management plan if it was submitted, but we'd be happy to share that with the chair, vice chairs, and take their input and comments before it was signed off, so we would have some ultimate control and members would have some input to that process.
Come back, Chair.
Yeah.
So it'll be conditioned that there has to be a management plan.
There's a condition that there has to be a management plan that would have to be submitted, and it's condition 8.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's a reasonably strict and onerous condition, really, with quite tight time frames, but exactly the same as Matlock. We would be happy to share that with the chair and the vice chairs and have their input before we sign anything off. So it would be very carefully scrutinised by officers and by members.
I would say that the Matlock site and this Rowsley site, they've got different sort of issues and whatever. So I don't think we could just lift the one. I'm not saying you've said this. Lift the one from Matlock and apply it to.
Yeah, sorry,
Rowsley.
councillor, I might have been unclear then. So the conditions the same. The actual management plan will need to cover different things, and will be come to different conclusion. Thank you.
Councillor Lees.
Thank you, Chair. Can we just clarify if this site is for the families that we owe an homeless duty to, or is it for any traveller family?
It specifically would be permitted for travellers who the council have a duty under the homelessness. Condition 3 says the use shall be restricted to named travellers for whom the council has a homelessness obligation through their local connection. And I think that's probably as tightly as we can condition that, and that does tie it to that particular group of people. Thank you.
Does that carry on through to the siblings of those families as well? Do you know? Or is that outside this remit or not?
I think I'd have to ask our housing officer to comment at this point.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, it's specifically for the families that we're currently dealing with at the moment. It wouldn't extend beyond that, and we would contain that within named licence agreements on those sites.
So does that mean it'll go down through the generations of that particular family?
It won't, because these are temporary sites, so they're only there for a specific amount of time. So anybody additional joining those families would be dealt with outside of those particular households.
Thank you.
Can I just move from the chair? Will someone second me extend the meeting by an hour now, please? Are all members happy with that? That seems to be unanimous. Thank you. So continue, obviously. I think we've reached the point where we need to get into debate. Sorry, Neil. I'll take it that you're the final person to ask a question or questions.
That's interesting. Thanks, David. I had a few questions, most of which have already been answered. The named users that we have a homelessness duty to, can that group be expanded, and who would make that choice if it could be?
The conditions pretty strict on who could occupy the site, and the housing authority control the homelessness register and homeless lists and the names of the particular family members. So that would be, it would probably be in combination of those. That there's quite a strict planning condition that we could enforce and we could control. We'd need cooperation obviously from the housing authority to advise us who the named people are that are meant to be on site, so that checks could be carried out if it became a pressing issue. But the condition would allow that control.
Yeah, but we are the housing authority as well, aren't we?
Yes, my colleague can confirm the exact statutory duty, but yes.
Right, okay, thanks. How fixed is the design for the access to the main site? I see that the red line has got a roadway which goes pretty much across the centre of the car park. Is that going to be delineated in some way, or will it just, be assumed?
Thank you, councillor. So it's not planned to be delineated as such, but it's very clearly shown on the plan, and it's the clear logical route through the centre of the site, avoiding parked cars and etc. So I think we would, if it really came to it, we could go on site and say the access is shown as here, that's your access. But I think that's highly unlikely because that's the logical route through the centre of the parking area.
Am I still working there? Yeah. Can we, as a planning authority, ask the council to provide bays, white lines and what have you, to define where people could be parking more efficiently in the rest of the car park as a Grampian condition? And could we negotiate with the level centre about providing them with designated parking spaces?
Right then, councillor, that's actually extremely useful, and that's one of the best comments anyone's made all night. Within the blue edge, we can impose conditions, we can impose Grampian conditions that prevent a use taking place before certain things happen. It would meet all the tests of reasonableness, relevant, associated with the, and it would be extremely useful, and then members could require such a condition, and a set number of parking spaces could be set aside to serve the level centre, which then would hopefully alleviate concerns to a certain extent. So that is something we'd be really happy to impose a condition on if members felt that was necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil.
I've got more, David.
Okay,
Sorry.
well, carry on.
The air quality contamination, there was comments about the surface bringing up dust or being muddy. Will we be dressing the surface to make it safe, and will we be checking for contamination? Will it be? Can we be sure that we're not going to be creating an unhealthy site? And would that be straightforward, or would it be nightmarish?
So the two things, contamination we've already touched on, and we could impose a condition to require a land contamination survey with mitigation if members wanted to impose that. In terms of grassing the site and accounting for dust, they'd certainly could be things that could be within the management plan that we could deal with through management plan negotiations.
Right, and I'm afraid I've got one more. I'm with Dermot here. I think it's very interesting that we have a management plan, but I think one size does not fit all. I think we should be quite cautious about just thinking that we can write it and it'll be straightforward and it'll work everywhere. I think we should be thinking carefully about our management plan, our enforcement, whether or not it has white lines on top of the, or red lines, sorry, on top of the white lines that we've just put in the car park. Whether or not we have red lines on our management plan as to what it is we're going to accept or what it is we're not going to accept. And so that we can make that clear to residents and users, the named users, so that everybody knows where they stand. And I rather hope that might simplify matters for people. I don't know, is that possible?
I would just answer that very quickly to say the applicant sat in front of you, hopefully listening to everything you're saying. If the application was to be approved, I'm sure they'll seek to cover all those points in the management plan that will then be scrutinised by officers and members. So we should be able to cover all those points.
Thank you.
I think finally, Councillor G.
Yeah, just one question. If this application was granted today, when do you anticipate there would be like a check-in date for these designated travelling families? When are you anticipating it actually being used by them? Because obviously it's between March and October, is that correct? And then it's now 24th of June. What is your expectation? Because and is it just a double-barrel question? Are these families currently housed in Ashbourne?
The particulars of that I'd have to pass over to the housing team. I'm not able to definitively answer that.
Through you, Chair. It's a difficult question to answer at the moment because obviously we've got one family on site on a previous application. As things stand at the moment, they're another family that we are looking to obviously support moving forward, but they are not looking at homelessness in the very near future, but they are on unsuitable accommodation. So we would have to take that view as and when if this application was to come forward as granted. We would need to look at those timescales. Obviously, in terms of the conditions, they'll take time to come forward. We won't be able to do that next week. Potentially, they could take a longer period of time, which obviously eats into that time that's available to us on this site. So there's a lot of plates in the air at the moment to understand if we would be able to get them to a point where it's a meaningful length of time on that site for us to move them on to know that they're going to then have to move off again onto another site that obviously we're going to bring forward as planning application to a future planning committee.
So would I be correct in understanding that here we're trying to grant something urgently that's not actually an urgent need?
It could be an urgent need, depending on how quickly, if the land that those families are on, those actions are taken to remove them, or through any other reason why they would have to leave that land, because they're on land that they are not supposed to be living on, and obviously that could end for any particular reason, not just through court action. It could be through fear, through threats, etc. And if they were unable to remain on that land for tomorrow, as an example, then we have a homelessness due to somebody who we would need to provide some accommodation for.
All right, but I mean, do you have actually any process of, because we've got these sort of rules in place where we're putting sites available for certain periods of time from March until October, then October, I think Matlock Bath comes into it. Do you have any control or power on actually making these movements happen? Or are you at the beck and call of the travellers to do what they feel like they want to do at any particular time?
Through you, Chair. We obviously the power is within the planning application. The planning application has got conditions in there that states that they can only be on site for 6 months. So we would then be under obviously a legal obligation to make sure that that was to take place, and we would obviously serve relevant notifications. Part of the management plan would be bring forward sort of a licence agreement or formal agreement in relation to people staying on the land, and we could impose conditions against that and obviously seek for those people to be removed well in advance of those dates, so we could take the relevant legal action to move them from site to site.
Right, members, we've got a recommendation in front of us. It's really now down to you to decide whether or not that is moved and seconded and debated, or whether or not members have an alternative. Councillor Lees.
Thank you, Chair. Very good reports, very good conversations throughout. Unfortunately, I'd like to move this against officer recommendation on some of the above grounds. I don't feel that it fits policy S1, sustainable development principles. I think there's problems with policy HC6, sustainable location, in the paragraphs A, C and D. And there's also a significant detrimental impact on the neighbouring amenities and the land owners, including the businesses, and adverse impact on the White Loop. We've had all these questions, all these letters in from the public, and they seem to have gone unnoticed, I'm afraid. And also, I think it's S4, development in the countryside, falls into this category with being on the doorstep of the Peak Park. And I also, PD1, design and placemaking, again, impact on the local amenity, tourists, businesses, accessibility, and policy S9, the rural parishes development strategy, paragraph C, plus loss of car parking spaces for the businesses. Item 713 states the Gypsy and Liaison supports this proposal, but the family concerned are actually in Ashbourne at the moment, just on the edge of my ward, and have been there since November. This is one of the families, the homeless families, and basically they do not wish to go to this site at all, or they do not wish to go to the Matlock site. They need, as one of the speakers did actually state, they need to be in the south of the county in the Ashbourne area. So this has totally been ignored with this, with any of the applications or any of the statements made. The site reduces the car parking excessively, with the travellers having to pass through the car park to the proposed site. I can't see how it would be possible to police this issue unless a separate entrance is made into the site, which again would be another application. So we've got no management plan in place, which is going to be a condition, but looking at it in realistic, it's not going to be ready to occupancy until 2026, should it be approved. We've got no contamination report. Serious effects with the white loop, and for this reason I am moving against officer recommendation.
Does that find a seconder?
Yeah.
Thank you, councillor. It's up to you, councillor G. Yeah.
John's turning soon.
I think the council needs to admit when it makes a mistake, and bringing this site forward for travellers is a big mistake. Now, I don't need to, in terms of the actual planning policy, I did actually pass this paper on to my daughter today, actually, because she's studying urban planning. She's in the 3rd year of a 5-year Master of Planning degree. I gave it her for 15 minutes, and she said, Dad, she says, this is no good because it contradicts the local plan. And I said, she says, it doesn't meet the requirements of HC6. And she had 15 minutes with it. She got it on her phone. She sent me the link to the local plan. That's our adopted local plan. And she gave me a lot of reasons, many of which have been mentioned by Stuart and also the expert planner over there. What you find with experts is some sort of have different ideas about one thing or another. But I think one of the serious issues with this site is that it's not close to amenities for the travellers. You know, it's basically cut away, not in the middle of nowhere, but it's not in a place that is deemed suitable. So there's quite a lot of reasons why it does contradict. She also brought up the issue about the flood risk. She said there's a contradiction with whether it's in flood risk 1 or 2. So obviously there were some issues between the county council. We know the county council have objected to it vehemently. I mean, you can see that in the papers. So, I mean, we're getting advice from county council. You know, we can't just dismiss what the county council is saying, and they've got issues with the White Peak Loop, which is really important. I mean, you wouldn't want to put travellers in Assop Station car park, would you, next to the, you know, the Monsell Trail, because it would have some impact on tourism, etc. Now, in terms of the situation with parking spaces, I know it's been presented to us as if it's not an issue, and the fact that the site is enclosed. But the reality with parking spaces, and when you put travellers in a car park, the car park becomes unusable for a lot of people because they don't want to go into it. So it's not a matter of whether there's space there. And we've seen an example in the car park at Matlock Station, because that's a big car park and it's got travellers at one end, but the actual usable spaces are sparsely populated. And this is in a town that's got a shortage of parking. Everywhere else you go in the town, the car parks are chock-a-block, but that one's empty because people don't want to drive into it. We've seen the reasons why. People have said the impact on themselves. They're worried. They don't want to go there. The businesses are being impacted. So, I mean, you know, by voting this down, we're not losing anything because we're not providing a site for travellers who imminently want it, because we've been told they don't actually want to go to it. And it's said in this paper, the Gypsy Traveller Liaison Group have said it could be suitable, but they don't actually want to go there because they want to be in the south of the Derbyshire Dales area. We all know that. So why is there this urgency to make a decision tonight to create, you know, we obviously the policy of the group decided it wanted to have some sites, but this site is just not suitable. It's not acceptable. And all the local residents in huge numbers are going to be negatively impacted by it, and they're all council taxpayers to Derbyshire Dales. So I think we should support Stuart's proposal. And the issue of additional caravans being hypothetical. Of course it's not hypothetical because it happens all the time. I mean, I drive past Matlock Station and on regular basis there's additional caravans and we do nothing about it, and we can't do anything about it. It doesn't matter what special plan you put in place and write on paper, nothing is actually done. And everybody's impacted in a bad way. So I'm really happy to support Stuart's proposal to throw this out tonight.
Right, we've got a motion before us. I'll invite Councillor Hughes. So it's now members speaking either for or against the motion, please. Councillor Hughes and then Councillor Dobbs.
Thank you, Chair.
David.
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid I'm going to support Councillor Lee's and Councillor G's motion to refuse this application. I don't agree with everything they've said. Matlock Car Park has always been underused. It's not because the travellers are there. It's just because it's a big car park. But that's different from this particular car park. It is a big car park. It's open. There's plenty of space within it. The Rowsley car park is not like that. It's a bit claustrophobic, to be honest, and it would become more claustrophobic as a result. I was concerned by the officer's response about the equalities assessment. Very concerned. It seems that we are underestimating the impact that this will have on the level centre. Councillor Lee's talked about the businesses, so I won't talk about those, but about the level centre. And a number of people who go to the level centre do suffer from issues that would mean that any disruption would cause them severe anxiety and might result in them not wanting to go to the level centre. So this is a real problem, and it's one that I think the planning officers need to consider and to have considered in more detail and more specifically, and understand what the problems that those people would face. So I can't support it, and I would ask Councillor Lees and Councillor G to include the issues over the equalities assessment and the lack of detail about assessment against the issues against people who have neurodivergent issues. That is another reason for refusing this particular application.
I just intervene very quickly, and absolutely no disagreement with any of the views or points of the councillor. If we refuse the application, I'd just be very careful how you frame that. Sort of flaws and failures that you perceive in the assessments might not be planning issues or something that is a planning matter per se. But if you feel there would be a detrimental impact upon sensitive users at the level centre, that absolutely would be a sound reason for refusal if that's your consideration. So just be mindful of how that's worded if you add that as a reason for refusal.
Chair, I understand, but we have to take those issues into consideration in the decisions that we make. They may not be planning, it may not be a material planning consideration, but they are a reason, even in a planning committee, to refuse, because to do otherwise would be illegal in any case.
Don't disagree with a single word of that. I'd say the reason for refusal would be better if it said there was an unacceptable impact upon people at the level centre, rather than the actual base data and supporting reports, etc. Just that there is an impact, that there's an impact from the development that you find unacceptable, and that's perfectly acceptable as a reason for refusal.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Thank you, David. It's now Councillor Peter Dobbs, then it's Sue Burfoot, and then Lucy Peacock.
Thank you, Chair. 2 points. Firstly, where the travellers are at the moment is also a place where there are council taxpayers, and of course they could be made homeless from that site at any point. And what do? I mean, this was part of a strategy to have a temporary solution, at which it appears that you want to deny this council. That's a serious thing to do. My second point is that I would like to make sure that this council does not in any way endorse a pattern of use of the level centre which runs apparently totally contrary to their original travel plan, which was that people were dropped off at the level centre. This is 150 metres from this car park down a partially adopted road, for which on one side the pavement is permanently blocked by cars which seem to be left there 24/7. Then an area of shared space and an uneven surface, and then the level centre.
I think the original strategy that these people were taken there and then presumably the driver or whatever then went to another car park to wait is fine. It could be this car park, there could be demarcated places, fine. But I don't think the idea that this is a drop off and walk down point should be endorsed. I don't think we should take that or give that impression. Okay, there are issues with this, but I would hate to think that we're making the perfect the enemy of the good. This does address several of the issues. It's only for a limited period of time, and it does address a problem which could exist tomorrow, easily. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Burfoot. It's Councillor Burfoot. He has a... Gareth's already spoke. You can speak up towards the winding up. Gareth. Okay, go on then.
One of the things I missed that I'd just like to remind the council that the default position for this actual station car park site is that it has been deemed by the full council to be not suitable for a traveller's site, because I did print these papers out. It was the council meeting on the 24th of November 2022. And item 8 on page 98, it said that having considered the views of the town parish councils, local residents, businesses and ward members, the following sites not to be considered as suitable for designated by the council as potential temporary sites for gypsies and travellers with a local connection to the Derbyshire Dales. And there was a list of 27 sites, for some reason in Roman numerals. And the site at Old Station Car Park, Rowsley, is number X, which is 10. And as far as I know, while I've been on this council, that hasn't been superseded. Or I know when we first came on the council, there was a possibility it was trying to be rescinded, but it never happened. That was on the 23rd of September 2023, because the paper that came to the council was taken out before the council meeting. So the council still can fall back on that meeting on November 2022.
Okay, Councillor Burfoot.
Thank you, Chair. Could I say first of all that I'm not a member of the new ruling administration at the county council, far from it, but I do hope that they will, as the new administration, help us in this very difficult task that we have of finding sites. I think we were let down by the previous administration here, but I'll get that off my chest and carry on. I have listened very carefully to what's been said tonight. I do think there are huge, and I realise that it might be considered hypothetical that there might or might not be additional caravans turning up on this site, but we've got absolutely no way of separating the entrance. Now, in Matlock, that has worked very well. There are no additional caravans there. They are not able to get in. In the past, there have been huge problems, and we've had to get eviction notices and court orders, and it's been very stressful, particularly for our officers at the district council. And I'm afraid, I think, if this was to happen at Rowsley, we'd go through all the same procedures again. It does say in the report that it's all about assessing this application in terms of providing a suitable site for travellers while respecting their traditional way of life, but also respecting the interests of the settled community. Now, I think at the moment, a very dusty, dark, dismal car park is not the place for the travellers. It seems pretty clear, well, I think it's pretty clear that they won't like it there. And we'll go through all these things again about trying to find them somewhere, and it makes life difficult for everybody, not just for officers at the district council, but for the travellers themselves. So for those reasons, I've considered this really carefully and I've not taken the decision lightly, but on balance, my decision is that by doing what we've got in front of us, we don't make it right for anybody. We don't make it right for the council. We don't make it right for the travellers themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burfoot. Councillor Peacock.
I'd just like to express my agreement with Councillor Dobbs. I think I can see that local people are upset about it, and I can see that there are issues. I haven't particularly heard anything that couldn't be solved with some forms of mitigation that could be conditioned. And in particular, things like dropping people off at the leisure centre, at the level centre, would seem like a good idea. But also, this is a temporary site. It's not. We don't have the same considerations as we would if it was a permanent site, and I feel that the public interest in providing a home for this specific family overrides the objections from the planning policies.
Thank you, Councillor Slack.
Thank you, thank you, Chair. Yeah, there's a lot of. It's a difficult site. It's very dark, as Councillor Burfoot has said. But also, there's never been a proper check on contamination on the site, which is essential, really, for the site to go forward. So I wouldn't support it without a check on contamination. Also, Chair, I think there's maybe a possibility, as other Councillor Dobbs and others are referred to, that we may get a site which we already planning permission many years ago at Ashbourne, but we live in hope and hope that site comes forward. And if it does, it will solve a lot of problems. At the moment, I'm very, to county hall previously, I abstained from voting for any of the sites because I didn't think any of them were suitable, and I still are of that opinion now. So thank you. That's so I won't.
Councillor Buttle. Is there anybody else after Neil, please? Thank you, John.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I'm with Lucy on this. I think our statutory duty to homelessness and the fact that we actually have no homelessness in the Derbyshire Dales apart from travellers is something that we should reflect on, and we should be careful about the fact that we're blocking something which isn't popular and isn't really particularly good. It's a least worst solution, but it is a solution. And the traveller family, they're living constantly without being accepted by the community, aren't they? Wherever they are, they cannot be legally unless we give them somewhere to live. And that's up to us. It's up to us to give them somewhere to live so they can live within the bounds of normal behaviour rather than having to be, like on the edges. I'm not happy with going against like what feels like a certain amount of community concern. But I'm definitely going to not support Stuart, and I'm going to support the officers on this one.
I'll bring in Councillor Boynton and then Councillor Murphy, please.
We talk about minor conflict with the planning policy. And whilst I respect the planning officer's professional opinion, from what I've heard tonight, I think the breaches are more severe than has been indicated. We talk about planning balance. From my point of view, from what I've heard, the planning balance actually goes the other way against approving this. Irrespective of whether we do or we don't approve this, the travellers will not use the site. and that is a fact. Not relevant to the planning, but we're looking at huge expenditure, gates, parking sites, resurfacing, electricity, everything else that goes into that. It's a huge expense, and it will all be for nothing because they will not move to Rowsley. There are various reasons why, which obviously can't go into now.
Sorry, go
on. This is completely irrelevant to the planning application, isn't it?
Yeah. I think you're just expressing it as how it is, John. To be honest.
I'm just stating a fact.
Yeah.
That irrespective of what happens, that is the fact that it will not get used. And if you want to bring it back to planning, we will not be providing anywhere for people who are homeless because they will not use it.
Just through you, Chair, just to deal with the point of order and the point that's been made. That is completely correct in terms of whether the site will be used thereafter is not, in my view, a material planning consideration. A planning application has been made by the council in its capacity as the applicant and the local housing authority. So therefore, members must determine it in respect of the merits and the details that are set out within the report.
Thanks, Aftab. I was listening to the debate, and I'm happy just to, hear members' views. I think it probably is a really good point that members have identified several reasons why they may vote to refuse the application, but whether or not the end user comes and uses the site wouldn't be a material planning consideration or a material reason for refusal. I think that is a key point just to underline. But it's part of a healthy debate and context and background, but it wouldn't be material to actually making the decision.
Okay, Councillor Dermot. Yeah.
Thanks, Chairman. Great debate tonight. Great contributions from the residents. I heard what Peter said, and we do, as I believe, have other sites that will be coming to planning in due course. So not everything is lost. Sorry, Peter? Right. So there's a hope there, and then obviously, like Peter has said, maybe that site in Ashbourne that was closed off to us some time ago might come into consideration one day. So, but on the basis of what I've heard tonight, I can't support this application. I respect the officers and all the work they've done and whatever, but this is a bridge too far. Sorry.
Does any other member wish to speak? Because we've, gone through the questions. We've had a good debate. It's an interesting mix of views. There's absolutely nothing political tonight because the views are from all parties. And I think it's time perhaps we put it to the test.
Chair, could I make one point, please? I'd like to thank Councillor Murphy for his kind words. We just make a professional recommendation. The planning committee is the determining body, and we respect that and your role in that, and we'll support you in your decision. Before the vote's taken, if we are heading towards a refusal, in the debate there was two possible further reasons for refusal, which one was the impact on sensitive users of the level centre, and the other was Councillor Burford put forward the view that it's not a suitable site or appropriate living conditions for a traveller family. Does the mover and seconder want those to be part of the vote as reasons for refusal if it is refused? I think that's an important point, please.
Certainly, Chair. Both reasons. Yeah, I actually did forget one, which was the time that the site is going to be used between March and November. That site will be covered basically by a tree canopy, which is going to be damp, and it's been pointed out. And I disagree with Councillor Dobbs because if they was evicted tomorrow, no way would they go to that site. And this is one of the two families that we owe an owner's duty to. So they'll just move on somewhere else. So fully support of the additions to the refusal.
So within the context of the planning application, It's been moved and seconded that this be refused. All those in favour of refusal, please show. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 against, 2 against, 3 against, sorry. Abstentions. Therefore, the motion is carried and the application has been refused.